Mike Schur. That is the story of Tammany Hall and Boss Tweed, the biggest, baddest, most corrupt machine New York City ever built. Do you have any sort of like larger big picture takeaways? For me, I was really struck by the role that media played in this story, and particularly the role of comedy, cartoons, right? It wasn't the cops or Congress or even rival politicians who brought down Boss Tweed. It was journalists and cartoonists.
I'll say a couple things. Number one is one of the best things about this country, this screwed up, messed up, messy, complex country that we live in, is that in the First Amendment, it says very clearly the government cannot put you in jail for or prosecute you in any way for speaking up and saying what you believe. And it also says that the media is free. And because of that, we have a system by which newspapers in history and television shows and radio programs and other media outlets are allowed to point out and make fun of and highlight corruption in government. That has always been true. It is, in theory, I would say, still true today. When I worked at Saturday Night Live, which was my first job, Jim Downey, who's probably the greatest political satirist, he's the Thomas Nast of his day, really, wrote the famous debate sketches between Bush and Gore in 2000. And, you know, the famous, the first debate sketch involved, summarize your campaign in one word, and Al Gore, Daryl Hammond as Al Gore said lockbox. And Will Ferrell as George Bush said strategery. Mm-hmm. And that line stuck to George Bush so thoroughly. He did have a lot of malaprops in his day, but there's a large number of people who believe that he really said that he really said strategery at one point. There's a lot of people who believe that Sarah Palin said, "I can see Russia from my house." She didn't. Mm-hmm. Tina Fey said that as Sarah Palin on SNL. Mm. And that tradition, that is very much in the Thomas Nast tradition, right? There's a difference between the way people understand the world we live in and the country we live in from dry media reports about fraud and corruption and everything else, and the way that we see it through comedy. And comedy is often a more powerful weapon and a more direct way to make people understand something about government and corruption and fraud and whatever else is going on than actual news. And that's all I was thinking of as you were telling this story is thank goodness that this country allows us to do that, because I believe that is the most effective way often for people to come to understand what their political leaders are doing. That's what Thomas Nast did to Boss Tweed, and that's what Jim Downey and other folks have done to politicians through SNL cold opens over the years.
Do you think that culturally we actually kind of underestimate the power of jokes? Like, can humor still land a knockout punch? I'm thinking about South Park right now. Yeah, is really appears to be puncturing the armor of this administration in a very startling way. I
mean, the media landscape in which we currently live is so much more fractured. You know, at the time, Harper's Weekly was probably the most powerful and important institution in media. And obviously there's barely newspapers anymore. And now there's barely kind of TV. There's no monoculture in TV anymore. We're now in this TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat world where things are very, very fractured. Everybody has their own algorithm. So the question to me isn't whether humor can be as potent a tool anymore. It's whether the delivery mechanisms that we are employing now can actually deliver a piece of satire to the world that way, or whether people are so siloed off that a large majority of the public won't ever see the same thing. That's my fear.
I know exactly what you mean, and I feel that sense of sort of fractured culture that you're speaking to, but I still have this feeling, and it may be transitioning into more of a hope at this point, but a feeling that truly exceptional work, whether it's a South Park episode or a particularly keen clip of stand-up, like the cream still rises to the top, and it can still sort of permeate those silos.
I would hope so, because I think if the story of Boss Tweed teaches us anything, it's that, that is what is needed in these moments. What's needed is a voice of satire and clarity and perspective that can cut through and present in a single picture or a single comedy sketch or a single joke what it would take a scholar, hours to properly relay. A picture of a greedy person as a vulture devouring democracy is a lot more effective in a single blow, in a single coup, than a lengthy article or a 6-part series in the New York Times or something like that.